And of course the beach house should go to me. Ava's sharp voice cut through the murmurs filling the room. After all, I'm the eldest. My blood turned to ice in my veins as I listened to my stepdaughter's words. We were gathered for Ethan's wake, and before his body was even cold, his children from his first marriage were already squabbling over his assets like hungry vultures. Leo nodded vigorously. For sure, the old man would have wanted us to have it. All those summers we spent out there as kids. Nora shifted uncomfortably but said nothing as Ava continued. This entire situation is just obscene. How could he leave everything to that woman? She jerked her head in my direction, blind hatred glinting in her eyes. I felt Derek's firm hand on my arm, grounding me. Ethan's oldest friend and our family lawyer leaned in. Don't listen to them, Mira. This is just the grief and greed talking. But it didn't feel that way to me. Not with the venom in Ava's voice as she spat. She was nothing more than a glorified nurse he took pity on after his divorce. We're his real family. The snakes had slithered out while I was still reeling from Ethan's death. Just 2 weeks ago he had been hale and hearty, regaling our son Caleb with plans for his 13th birthday trip. Now he was gone, struck down by a heart attack, sudden and cruel, and his offspring from his first marriage were wasting no time asserting their birthright. Caleb tugged at my sleeve, eyes wide with confusion and fear. Poor boy didn't understand the depths of his siblings' depravity. Sweet, sensitive Caleb, who had adored his father with every fiber of his being, while they had been poisoned by greed. Ava sneered at me again, and I stiffened, gripping Caleb's hand tightly. How dare these ingrates dishonor Ethan's memory mere days after his passing? He had taken care of them, doted on them, rebuilt his relationship with them after the divorce, despite their mother's objections. And this was how they repaid him, by lusting after his estate before he was even laid to rest. A familiar voice rang out, stern but controlled. That's enough. Derek had stepped forward, shoulders squared. Out of respect for Ethan, I must ask that you keep such discussions private for now. Give the man a goddamn chance to be laid to rest properly before you start squabbling like this. For a beat, a tense hush fell over the room. Then Leo opened his mouth, that perpetual sneer on his lips. But Derek raised his hand, a calming gesture but one that brokered no arguments. I'll be reaching out soon to all of you regarding dispersal of assets. But not today. We're here to mourn Ethan and celebrate his life, not indulge petty monetary disagreements. Are we clear? Ava looked murderous, but she gave a terse nod. Crystal. She still, then turned on her heel and stormed out, Leo and Nora trailing behind. In their wake, a fragile silence shattered only by Caleb's hiccuping sobs. I pulled my son close, stroking his hair as my own tears flowed. Little did those vultures know, but Ethan had one final ace up his sleeve. As I clutched his last letter to me, written in shaky but determined strokes, I knew that he would have his justice. The game was just beginning. Sleep eluded me that night as Ethan's words burned in my mind. My dearest Mira, if you're reading this, then the worst has happened. I rolled onto my side, clutching the crumpled sheets as the memory washed over me in vivid detail. It was just last week that I had discovered the thin manila envelope tucked in Ethan's desk drawer, my name scrawled across it in his familiar handwriting. At first I had shrugged it off, assuming it was related to another of his business matters. But then I spotted the date, just 3 days before his fatal heart attack. My hands had trembled as I sliced through the envelope's flap. 5 neatly folded sheets fluttered out, each bearing a number, 1 through 5. Ethan's meticulous nature shone through even here, it seemed. As I unfurled the first page, the bottom dropped out of my stomach. It was a letter explicitly intended for me to read after he was gone. An icy chill gripped me as I started to read, barely paying attention to Caleb's playing in the next room. My dearest Mira, if you're reading this, then the worst has happened and I am no longer with you. My heart thudded as I inched forward. When we married 11 years ago, you became my true partner in every sense of the word. You have been the calm in my storm, the night to my day, the unshakable foundation that kept me grounded even as I built my empire. I remembered my shock, my disbelief at his premonitions, his assumptions that he would be torn from me so abruptly. Yet as the cruel fates would have it, his instincts proved correct. Just 3 days after penning this letter, he suffered a massive coronary during one of his morning meetings. The words blurred on the page as my vision swam with tears. This couldn't be the end. Not like this. Not after everything we had built together. Not after the ups and downs, the battles and battles won. Ethan had been my soulmate, my partner in crime. How could he be so cruelly ripped away? I continued reading, my chest tightening with every line. I know without a doubt that Ava, Leo, and Nora will come after my assets like starving wolves the moment I'm gone. I could practically hear his wry chuckle through the ink. They have revealed their true greedy, grasping natures to me, time and again. And while I have provided for them materially, I cannot allow them to descend like locusts, devouring every last flower in their path. My jaw clenched as I recalled the unseemly scene at the wake, those three circling like vultures, squabbling over Ethan's properties before he was even in the ground, just as he had predicted right here in these letters. Which is why, my love, you must fight them. The letter's tone intensified, the scrawled handwriting pressing furiously into the paper. You must fight to keep them from destroying the legacies we built, not just the business empire, but the future and security we crafted for Caleb. I caught my breath at the mention of our son's name. They cannot be allowed to sully his inheritance, his future, with their rapacious greed and toxic avarice. The words hung there, emphatic and absolute, a call to battle, one which Ethan knew would come even from beyond the grave. I remembered looking up from the letter, a steely resolve settling in my heart. My wonderful husband, he had been willing to take on this fight himself, against his own flesh and blood, but fate had intervened, leaving it to me to carry the torch. As I read on through the night, the path became clear. Ethan's instructions outlined the first salvo, the opening moves in what would surely be a high-stakes war, one which would determine not just the fate of my family's future, but justice itself. Tell Derek I've left everything in readiness, the letter closed. He'll know exactly what path we must take. I exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of responsibility envelop me, but also the fortifying embrace of Ethan's trust. This was his wish, his final act to protect those he truly loved, and I would be damned if I'd fail him. Gripping the letter tightly, I rose and strode into Caleb's room. He started at my entrance, but I shushed him gently. "Don't worry, my sweet boy," I murmured, stroking his hair. "Your father has given us instructions, and I'll make sure we carry them out to the letter." Caleb opened his mouth, questions swimming in his eyes, but I just smiled, squaring my shoulders. It's time we fight to protect our future. My hands trembled ever so slightly as I unfolded the second letter, those now familiar looping scrawls tantalizing me with their secrets. Despite the cold pit of dread that had taken up residence in my stomach, a frisson of anticipation coursed through me. What revelations awaited within these pages? What weapons had my brilliant husband prepared to battle his monstrous spawn? Caleb watched me intently, his wide eyes missing nothing. The poor boy had been rendered so quiet, so somber by the events of the past weeks, it pained me to see his usual sunny exuberance dimmed, but I forced a reassuring smile for his sake. "Your father always did have a flair for the dramatic." I winked conspiratorially. "Let's see what he's cooked up for us this time." The first few lines plunged into Ethan's signature mix of straightforward instruction and wry observation. "You've always been my most capable partner in all endeavors, my love, so I know I can trust you to handle this situation with utmost discretion and resolve." My eyes narrowed as I continued reading. The first step, it seemed, involved a series of carefully coded file names and instructions to access a secure server that Ethan had created unbeknownst to anyone else. Ever the forward planner, my brilliant husband, it seemed this was his meticulously prepared battleground from beyond the grave. After 15 tense minutes spent following the digital trail of coded breadcrumbs, a vast encrypted database unfurled before me, organized into a series of ominously named folders. Avarsk SB, Leo HBGS, Norask ML. I frowned, sharing a sidelong glance with Derek, who simply shrugged. The old fox was inscrutable as ever. Slowly, I began opening the files, each one decrypting to reveal a staggering array of documentation. Financial statements, third-party audits, private communications, even sealed legal records. What the? I felt the blood drain from my face. Those ingrates, those grasping amoral snakes. The files painted a lurid portrait of untold avarice and deception spanning decades. From Nora's carefully hidden money laundering schemes to Leo's gambling indiscretions that would make a Las Vegas pit boss blush, to Ava's flagrant abuse of corporate resources and funds for her personal gain, no ethical line had gone uncrossed. When my eyes finally regained focus, I realized I was gripping Derek's arm in a white-knuckle grip, the muscles in my jaw practically grinding from clenched rage. How dare they? How dare those monstrous, thankless leeches spend years deceiving and stealing from the very father who had nursed them back into his good graces, after his divorce from their snake of a mother? Those... I was practically spitting, struggling for words to encapsulate the searing fury searing through me. Caleb shrank back, alarmed by the inferno that must have been blazing in my eyes. How could they do this? What kind of vile, soulless creatures could inflict such harm on their own family who gave them everything? Derek's face was grave, his voice solemn. Ethan wanted you to know the truth, Mira, to see exactly who and what you're dealing with. I'll kill them. The words burst forth before I could stop them, guttural and vicious. Those... My mouth twisted in revulsion, the depths of their betrayal playing out in lurid detail before my mind's eye. Their smug smiles at the wake, their blithe piggish privilege as they plotted to carve apart their own father's estate without an ounce of shame. A crimson haze began creeping across my vision as memories of their past transgressions compounded into an unstoppable tsunami. The lies, the selfishness, the flagrant using and abusing of Ethan's goodwill at every turn. Derek's voice was a lifeline dragging me back from the abyss. This is why he made that plan, Mira. This is what we're fighting. Slowly, the fog receded, my senses reorienting around that single-minded focus of determination. Yes, Ethan had seen this all coming. He knew exactly what vicious brood of vipers he had brought into this world, their fangs dripping with venom the instant he succumbed. That was why he had made preparations, why he entrusted his beloved wife with the tools to stand tall and fight for the family's true legacy. With trembling hands, I gathered the documents, weapons for the battle to come. Cold hatred flooded my veins as images of their smug, venomous faces burned in my mind. "All right, you grasping bastards," I growled, squaring my shoulders. "Let's go to war." The sleek lines of my cherry-red Mercedes ate up the road as I sped through the rain-slicked streets, the world outside blurring into a kaleidoscope of neon and shadow. In the passenger seat, Derek's reflection glared back at me in the windshield, his jaw set in a grim line. "You're sure about this?" The question cut through the tense silence. I didn't miss a beat. Absolutely. My knuckles tightened on the steering wheel. It's time they answered for their depraved actions. In the rearview mirror, I could see Caleb's wide eyes peeking over the top of Ethan's stack of files cradled in his lap, the damning evidence of his deceitful siblings' myriad sins. The poor boy had been shocked into numbed silence upon seeing the extent of their treachery. Not that I could blame him. This had to end here and now. There would be no more poison seeping from that festering wound, no more degradation of the family legacy that Ethan had poured his life into upholding. If his own flesh and blood lacked the honor and ethics to protect it, then I would stand in the breach and do what needed to be done. We pulled up to the ornate law offices, all carved mahogany and polished brass, in a classic display of old money decadence. Ava's vehicle was already in its typical spot. Of course, the leech would have arrived early to start spinning her vile machinations. The second my heels hit the marble floor, her shrill tones assaulted my ears. "This is utterly preposterous." She stabbed a filed nail in Derek's direction as Leo and Nora ringed her like sullen bodyguards. "How dare you even entertain this insipid notion that our inheritance could possibly be impacted? I won't have it." Derek cleared his throat. "Your father's wishes were quite clear in his most recent will and estate documents. His instructions were—" "His instructions?" Ava's nostrils flared with undisguised rage. How convenient that he left instructions that so transparently favor his little boy toy over his own children. My grip tightened on Caleb's hand until my knuckles turned white. That classless harpy, how dare she slander Ethan's choices with her petty, ignorant jealousy? Still, I kept my expression neutral as I stepped forward, the binders of evidence clutched like deadly weapons. There's something you should all see before we continue. I pitched my voice in a deadly calm tone. Some information that has recently come to light regarding all of your activities. Ava opened her mouth, eyes glittering with malice. But Leo beat her to the punch with that familiar snide bark of laughter. Oh, here we go with the histrionics. What's in those, huh? More of your little crocodile tears act to try and guilt us into money laundering. My words detonated like a bomb in the middle of their smug tirade, rendering them momentarily stunned into silence. I pressed on, keeping my voice even and measured. Embezzlement, tax evasion, fraud on massive scales totaling in the tens of millions over the past 2 decades. I held up the binders, letting them take in the sheer volume of evidence collected there. For all of it meticulously documented in these files, complete with third-party audits and legal documentation to back it up. An uneasy tension crept over their faces as a hush descended. I could see the gears churning as they grappled to process this sudden upending of the playing field. Then Leo spoke again, a desperate edge creeping into his mocking chuckle. Those are preposterous allegations with no basis in fact, I'm sure. Just more pathetic lies and fabrications from this manipulative. They're all true. The softly spoken declaration lanced through the room with shocking potency, drawing every eye to Derek. He met their incredulous stares with an implacable mask. Every single item in those files is true, documented, verified truth that can be substantiated in any court of law. He folded his hands calmly. Your father was well aware of your indiscretions over the years. He simply chose not to pursue them until his passing, at which point he ensured this information would be leveraged accordingly. The snakes were squirming now, beneath the blinding light of truth being shone into their squalid little burrow, faces paling and contorting with rage. But Ava still rallied with a last snarling burst of wounded entitlement. You liar! You pathetic old vulture, making up stories to try and steal what's rightfully ours. She wheeled on me, eyes wild, and you conniving little whore, always hanging on to father's coattails, thinking you could just take what belonged to his real family. I won't let you. I won't. Enough. Derek's tone brooked no argument. His own fury telegraphed in the flinty glare he leveled at the petulant heiress. When he spoke again, each word dripped with icy venom. You 3 have proven yourselves not only grasping ingrates but hardened criminals of the worst order who manipulated and stole from your own father. With any luck, you'll end up behind bars for the myriad charges that will be filed once this evidence sees the light of day. In that moment, the world seemed to pivot on its axis, the balance of power shifting in an instant. The snakes had overplayed their hands for the final time, and now they had nowhere left to slither or strike. An eerie silence reigned in the aftermath as their faces crumbled into sickly parodies of outrage and horror. I almost pitied them in that instant, so naked and pathetic were their shattered delusions. Almost. Looping my arm through Caleb's, I steered him back towards the exit, Derek falling in beside us. A twisted smile tugged at the corners of my mouth as I spared one final glance over my shoulder. In the end, a child's greatest heartbreak is the realization that this is darkness that they were born into. Then we were gone, leaving them to their despair and just desserts. The game had changed, and the players were going to learn just how thoroughly. The familiar hush of the plush study enveloped me as I sank into the supple leather armchair. How many times had I sat here sipping aged scotch while Ethan regaled me with tales of his latest business exploits? This room had been his sanctum, his inner circle where only those closest to him were permitted entry. Now it was the war room. Derek set down a tray laden with file folders and sheaves of paper, his craggy face drawn into pensive lines. We're making progress on multiple fronts, but there are still some concerning developments brewing. I arched an eyebrow, gesturing for him to continue as Caleb curled up on the divan, listlessly stabbing at his tablet. The poor boy had been avoiding me lately, no doubt overwhelmed by the dark realities being unearthed about his own family. Another consequence of those snakes' poison to contend with. Ava's been working the media circuits, spinning her narrative about being unfairly persecuted and trying to assassinate your character. A muscle ticked in Derek's jaw. He'd never been able to mask his disdain for Ethan's eldest. Rage flickered through me, though I fought to keep my expression impassive. Of course the wretch would stoop to such depths in her desperation, spreading salacious lies in a bid to sway the inevitable court of public opinion that would weigh in once this all went public. Still, I allowed myself a small predatory smile. If public sentiment is what she wants to play for, we'll gladly oblige her. Derek's eyebrows rose quizzically, even as understanding glinted in his eyes. With a few deft keystrokes, I activated the Media Blitz protocol Ethan had shown me, setting a vast factory of bloggers, pundits, and social media influencers into motion. Within minutes, the first damaging leaks began sprinkling across the internet, tantalizing whiffs of the snake's crimes, hitting just the right marks to whet appetites. "There," I stated with grim satisfaction. "Let's see how well her crocodile tears hold up against the documented facts of her family's misdeeds." Information was power, and Ethan had stockpiled enough ammunition for the mother of all wars on this front. Thanks to his paranoid foresight and meticulous records, any attempts at disinformation or suppression would prove futile against the tidal wave about to crash down upon Ava and her cohorts. Turning back to the files, I rifled through them with renewed vigor. "What else do we have? There's no such thing as too much leverage." Derek nodded, expression hardening. "I've also uncovered some disturbing activity around Ethan's companies that points to potential corporate sabotage attempts from our adversaries." My head snapped up. "Explain." "A number of concerning personnel moves and expenditure discrepancies at some of the subsidiary branches." Derek extracted a folder, handing it to me. "Here are the accounting audits. It looks like funds are being diverted into some shadowy slush areas, likely to fuel further disruptions." "Those wretched snakes," I hissed, scanning the documents with mounting disbelief and rage. Not content with robbing their own father and betraying his legacy, now they want to burn it all down, too. Of course they would stoop to such reprehensible depths. Their venomous greed and bitterness knew no bounds. Principles be damned. If they couldn't have Ethan's empire for themselves, they were determined to scorch the earth and salt the remains. Well, not on my watch. The phone was to my ear before conscious thought, muscle memory taking over as I rapidly punched in a coded sequence. When the line picked up, I didn't waste time with preamble. "Wade, it's Mira. We have a situation brewing. Possible infiltrators trying to compromise our holdings." I laid out the details in crisp, precise phrases, feeling a feral sort of satisfaction at the clipped, flinty responses from the other end. Ethan's head of corporate security had always been one of the family's staunchest loyalists and a consummate professional when it came to neutralizing threats. Derek watched me with an approving nod as I terminated the call, already mapping out our next actions. We'd hit them from every angle, whether slithering snakes or cunning serpents. Starting with locking down anything they tried to sink their greedy fangs into. A muffled gasp drew my attention across the room, where Caleb sat frozen, hand over his mouth and eyes wide with shock. Before I could react, his whispered words dropped like a lead weight. "Mom. The house." The security alert klaxon had already begun blaring by the time my feet hit the polished marble foyer downstairs. In one blistering glance through the reinforced windows, the full extent of the Viper's strike revealed itself. Glass shattered, gates torn open, windows smashed. An entire tactical team of masked intruders storming the premises, fanning out with cold precision. And at their core, striding with a victorious sneer, leading the charge, Ava. My heart stopped. No, not my home, not my sanctuary. My fists clenched in rage even as my mind whirred with sickening realization. The sudden activity around Ethan's assets. It had all been a feint, a diversion to draw our scrutiny away while the real play unfolded on our own doorstep. They were going for the jugular and hitting where it would hurt most. Derek exploded from the study, slamming his fist against the security lockdown switch as Wade's team began engaging the invaders. "We're cut off outside! They've trapped us inside!" My world narrowed to a single point of blazing fury as Ava's triumphant laughter rang out, muffled through the ballistic glass yet still scraping like nails. "Did you really think it would be that easy, you sanctimonious bitch?" She leveled the barrel of her rifle directly at me with a feral grin. "Time to burn it all down, starting with you." Checkmate, it seemed. The first thunderous volley of fire impacted against the windows as I pulled Caleb flush against me. So this was how it would end then, betrayed and outmaneuvered by those we should have been able to trust most. I met Derek's stricken gaze over Caleb's bowed head with a look of grim determination. No, not the end. The counterattack was just beginning. The muzzle flashes from Ava's assault rifle seemed to stretch into lurid slow motion, each round hammering against the reinforced windows in percussive bursts. Shards of shattered glass exploded inward, stinging my exposed skin as I shielded Caleb with my body. My mind raced even as fear clenched my gut. How could it have come to this? Gunfire and blood mere feet from where my darling Ethan used to read bedtime stories to our son. This home we had built together, now befouled by the very snakes who worshipped at the altar of their own greed. Safe room. Derek's shout cut through the cacophony as he hauled Caleb and I towards the hidden panic bunker. My mind flashed to the countless drills we had practiced, even as the floorboards gave way beneath our feet, swallowing us into the fortified bolt hole. My world shrank to bare concrete walls and the acrid smell of explosives residue as Derek sealed the entrance behind us. Caleb was shaking violently, pupils dilated with shock as he clung to me. My own heart hammered painfully, but I forced my features into a mask of calm resolution. "Shh! It's okay, my sweet boy," I murmured, stroking his hair as I once did when he suffered night terrors. "We're safe in here. Nothing can hurt us." A wry snort from the corner drew my attention to where Wade emerged from the shadows, eyes hard. "Yeah, for now, maybe. But those psychopaths aren't going to give up so easily." Derek shot him a warning glare, even as he ushered Caleb and me towards the bank of reinforced monitors lining one wall. My breath caught in my throat at the images playing out. A full-scale assault in progress, dozens of masked gunmen ravaging our home under Ava's crazed direction. The footage cut dizzyingly between the sweeping security cameras dotting the premises. A fresh wave of nausea rolled through me at the devastation, at the wanton disregard for anything other than their rapacious spite. Furniture smashed, paintings shredded, decades of treasured memories simply ruined in an instant, all at the hands of the very monsters I once called family. Ava appeared again on one monitor, face twisted into a garish leer as she tossed a priceless antique vase through a set of French doors. Come out! Come out!" she taunted in a saccharine sing-song, pivoting her rifle in slow arcs. "Don't you want to surrender and make this nice and easy?" I felt bile rise in my throat even as my grief and shock calcified into blistering rage. Easy? There would be nothing nice or easy about the reckoning to come, not after this unforgivable transgression, not after the bloodshed they had wrought upon hallowed ground. On another screen, Leo and Nora prowled through Ethan's study, gleefully upending bookshelves and smashing heirlooms beneath the butts of their rifles. An arc of crimson fury lashed across my vision at the wanton defilement of my beloved husband's inner sanctum. How dare they? How dare those mongrels defile what had been so sacred, so integral to the man they once claimed to love? We need to hit them back. The words dropped like granite between clenched teeth, and we need to hit them hard. Derek shifted, the worry lines etched deeper than I'd ever seen them. We're outnumbered and outgunned here, Mira. A direct confrontation would be suicide. My hands balled into white-knuckled fists, quivering with the effort of restraint. Easy for him to say, from the safety of our bolt hole, while that scourge continued to pillage and defile with impunity. Didn't he understand that there were some sins that could never be forgiven, some stains that could never be washed clean? I rounded on Wade, desperation clawing at the edges of my resolve. Tell me you have something, some way to strike back at them, to make them pay for what they've done. The grim-faced commando regarded me steadily for a long moment before giving a slow nod. We always plan for the worst contingencies. His finger stabbed a control, and a fresh bank of monitors flickered to life, displaying a dizzying array of maps, deployment patterns, weapon schematics, and other technical details. The way I see it, we've got two main options. Either go loud with stun grenades and tactical breach teams, or slip in quieter from the maintenance tunnels and hit 'em where they sleep. My jaw clenched as I studied the contingencies. Both were risky, both carried the potential for deadly escalation if things went sideways, But after what I just witnessed, after the depraved disregard for any shred of human decency, such delicacy seemed quaint. "Do it," I growled, feeling as if I were shedding the last vestiges of civilized constraint. "Hit them with everything we've got. Make the snakes. Burn them down if you have to. I don't care anymore." Wade's obsidian gaze remained steady even as a feral grin slowly crept across his features. "Yes, ma'am." 10 minutes later, a precisely synchronized symphony of thunder shook the compound. Chaotic screams and the hair-raising concussions of stun grenades battered the audio pickups. I watched in cold silence as Ava shrieked and clawed at her blinded eyes, fumbling for her weapon as the first assault teams descended, only to be met head-on by the grim-faced heavy weapons squads emerging from the tunnels, firepower barking in controlled metronomic bursts. Caleb recoiled in horror, ears ringing from the proximity blasts and eyes clamped shut as the nightmare played out before us. But I simply drank in every millisecond of unfolding carnage, allowing the numbing ice of vengeance to seep into my marrow. They had awoken a nest of hornets, and the stinging reprisal would be exquisite. My mouth curved ever so slightly as the tear gas canisters detonated, engulfing Ava in choking white clouds as her shrieks devolved into wet, gurgling sobs. Surrender? My voice was a low rasp, barely audible over the din of combat. Not a chance. The words kindled like sparks before roaring into an unstoppable inferno of heedless indignation. "You started a war tonight, and I'm going to make thrice damned sure you burn." The courtroom galleries were packed to the rafters, a veritable sea of suits and sharp angles punctuated by the intermittent clicks of cameras from the media pit. A low buzz of anticipation thrummed through the air, sparking with unseen currents of electricity as we awaited the arrival of the presiding judge. Beside me, Derek's expression was carved from granite, giving away none of the exhaustion or strain that etched his features after months of endless motions and legal wrangling. This would be the culmination, the deciding salvo in our battle to hold those treacherous vipers accountable not just for their sordid crimes, but for the very souls they had bartered away to the demons of greed and entitlement. When the bailiff finally announced the judge's entrance, a hush blanketed the room, allowing every muted footstep and rustling whisper to resonate obscenely. I inhaled deeply, steeling myself against the rising tide of anger and disgust that threatened to overwhelm me as Ava, Leo, and Nora were led in, still defiant in the face of their impending judgment. My nails dug crescents into my palms as I drank in their appearances. Ava's once haughty mask reduced to a twisted caricature of barely contained rage, Leo's perpetual sneer now tinged with naked fear, and Nora. Poor, pathetic Nora, whose cowardice and moral vacancy had condemned her to this fate alongside her monstrous siblings. They huddled together, shooting venomous glares and muttered asides like truculent children, even as their legions of millionaire attorneys fussed and preened. Pathetic, simply pathetic, the lot of them. This twisted family, if it could even be called that, had sown the whirlwind, and now they would reap the harvest of their unforgivable transgressions. I refused to allow even a glimmer of pity to take root in my heart, not after the blood spilled and atrocities committed in their death throes. No, if anything, they should count themselves fortunate to still be breathing after that fateful night. As the preliminary matters droned on in that somnolent legalese, my mind replayed the vivid images seared into its darkest recesses. The muzzle flashes bathing Ava's contorted mask in demonic shades as the opening salvo rained down. Leo's wretched screams as the fast-rope teams punched through the shattered windows in a hail of debris. Nora recoiling with very real terror as the piano wire traps shredded her would-be cover into splinters. By the time our forces had arrived, the courtyard resembled a bombed-out war zone, furniture and fixtures smashed and blasted into matchwood, elaborate frescoes obliterated by insensate gunfire, centuries-old heirlooms reduced to ash and echoes. My own home, our sanctuary, butchered on the twisted altar of their petty vindictiveness and depraved rapacity. Every ounce of mercy, of restraint, that may have dwelled within me withered away in those harrowing hours as the assault unfolded. Whatever pitiful dregs of family allegiance still lingered shriveled up and died amidst the maelstrom of hatred and revulsion that engulfed me. And when at last that final, glorious moment arrived, Ava and her cohorts disarmed, bloodied, forced to their knees amidst the smoldering ruins of their doomed siege. I knew there could be no forgiveness, not for them and the unforgivable evil they had unleashed. "Please," Nora's trembling plea, barely audible, cut through the ringing in my ears as powerfully as any gunshot. "Mira, please, it wasn't supposed to go this far," as if summoning the very last dregs of her moral cowardice could somehow undo the atrocities, the wanton devastation surrounding us. My gut twisted with reviled contempt. Ava, ever the irredeemable monster, spat a curse rebuke that withered on her bloodied lips even as I strode forward, the barrel of my sidearm leveled with uncompromising precision. "Don't." The word lashed out with all the blistering finality of a gunshot. "You don't get to beg." My voice was low, laced with a vitriol so pure and distilled that it seemed to sear the very air. "You don't get to plead or whimper or cry now after everything you've done." Despite the protests of the surrounding forces, I continued my advance until I stood mere feet from my quarry, staring down into those sunken pits of hatred and shame they dared call eyes. Only then, basking in the weight of their impotent fury, did I allow my mouth to crease into the slightest of vindicated sneers. "Your actions forfeited any such leniency the moment you decided to sacrifice everything, your names, your legacies, your very souls, on the pyre of your greed." The muzzle loomed inexorably, daring them to protest further. Ava and Leo were actually quailing now, some dim flicker of self-preservation kindling behind their masks of bravado, while Nora simply crumbled, fat tears streaking down her blotched cheeks. So it would be then. They could gnash and howl at their ill fortunes, lash out like the beasts they had revealed themselves to be. But in the end, we would have the last, most decisive word. My finger tightened fractionally on the trigger, as decades of insults, betrayals, and unspeakable acts of depravity washed over me, prepping me for the coup de grace, only to be halted by Derek's gruff tones. "You're right, Mira. They don't deserve any mercy, not with all the undeniable proof we've compiled of their grotesque criminality over the years." The old wolf stepped forward, a satisfied glint in his eyes as he savored the disbelieving horror dawning across the snake's features. "Which is why it will be a jury of their peers, untainted by these nauseating displays of arrogance and vice, who dictates their ultimate punishment. Long, lengthy prison sentences from which hopefully they emerge having reclaimed some shred of dearly lost humanity." I faltered, anger wavering for the briefest instant as Derek pressed his advantage. "Or they can choose the path of unfettered ruination, consuming themselves with hatred until they're nothing but hollow, empty husks alongside the wreckage of everything your father strived to build." He placed a steadying hand on my shoulder, grip vice-like. "But that decision is now out of our hands. We've won, Mira. It's time to step back from the abyss and let justice and truth reclaim their rightful place." My grip slackened, digits numb as the weight of his words impacted me. Of course, Ethan would want no blood on our hands, no matter how sorely tested our resolve. This was never about vengeance or sordid reprisals, but upholding the ideals he had embodied till his last breath. I met Ava's hate-filled, incredulous glare with a look of implacable resolve. "Don't mistake this for mercy or forgiveness," I rasped with finality. "Just the inevitability of karma finally catching up to dole out its judgments." As if on cue, the courtroom doors banged open, admitting a flood of bailiffs who quickly swarmed to take custody of the vipers, slapping heavy manacles around their wrists. Nora was openly hysterical now, Leo petrified in disbelief while Ava still clung to her indignant rage like a shipwreck victim, grasping flotsam. "This isn't over, you pathetic excuse for a human being." She thundered over the cacophony, straining against her restraints. "You think this little stunt means you've won? My father's precious legacy ends here, bitch. We made sure of it." But her seething bravado was just so much hollow bravado in the face of the implacable tide sweeping her away. I simply watched impassively, finally at peace. Wrong again, I'm afraid. The words carried the quiet weight of inevitability itself. The only thing ending here today is your poisonous delusions. One by one, their hollow threats and blusterings faded into the ether alongside their departing forms, and as they were finally dragged from the court, I felt a lightness in my chest, as if a decades-old weight had finally been lifted away. Next to me, Derek arched a wry eyebrow, the ghost of a smile creasing his features for the first time in ages. "You did it, Mira. It's over." And for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I felt my lips curve in a genuine, unfettered smile. Not of vengeance or triumph, but of the promise of redemption that lay ahead, a true legacy being born from the ashes of greed and hate. "No, Derek." I gave his hand in grateful squeeze. We did, and with Caleb at my side, we turned and walked out into the future, come what may. The soft breeze carried the scents of freshly turned earth and newly sprouted blooms, perfuming the crisp morning air with the promise of rebirth and renewal. I savored each inhalation, allowing the tranquil melodies of nature to wash over me as my fingers traced the carved letters on the granite headstone. Beloved husband, father, friend. 1968. So many memories, joyous and heartbreaking, triumphant and sorrowful, crystallized in those simple words and dates. An entire life and legacy distilled into cold, unfeeling stone, except not unfeeling, not anymore. The graveled path crunched softly behind me as Caleb approached, hands shoved into the pockets of his well-worn denim jacket, the one Ethan had gifted him on his 12th birthday only days before the fateful heart attack. My breath hitched at the sight of him, now standing eye-level to me, the same soulful hazel eyes regarding me with profound wisdom far beyond his 16 years. "You okay, Mom?" His voice was gentle, the last vestiges of adolescence still clinging to its timbre. I managed a wan smile, gesturing for him to join me. "Just remembering, is all." My fingers traced Ethan's name almost reverently as Caleb draped his arm around my shoulders, solid and reassuring. For long moments, we stood in companionable silence, united by the memories both joyous and haunting that permeated this hallowed space. Eventually, I felt composed enough to continue. "Your father was the most brilliant, passionate man I ever knew, right until the very end." I exhaled a tremulous sigh, leaning into Caleb's strength, both emotional and physical. He poured every ounce of his being into building his dreams, his legacy. And the sick part was how those he sought to include most of all were the ones who ended up trying to tear it all down. Caleb stiffened slightly, doubtlessly remembering those harrowing final days and the devastation wrought by his own flesh and blood. I pressed on, needing to exorcise these last vestiges of the poison. For months after the trial, I was consumed by hatred and anger toward them. The words tasted like ash on my tongue. It was like this all-consuming fire burning through me, torturing me with every waking moment, stoking my need for vengeance. I chanced a sidelong glance at my son's impassive features, searching for any traces of judgment or disdain. But his regard remained steady, constant, allowing me to unburden myself without fear of reprisal. At the time, it felt like the only way to cauterize the wound they had inflicted. The betrayal, the wanton devastation, like nothing else could ever let me achieve peace. My words grew softer, more reflective. But that wasn't true healing, it was just piling more hurt and anger on top of the first. Your father wouldn't have wanted that. He never let his quest drag him down into that darkness. He stayed focused on upholding the ideals and integrity that drove him. Caleb nodded slowly. He wanted to build and create, not just companies and empires, but something greater. His hand found mine, giving a reassuring squeeze. Something to protect people and give them shelter from the kinds of toxicity and hatred that fuels so much greed and wrongdoing. My throat constricted with a swell of pride at his insight and maturity. When had my bright-eyed little boy blossomed into this poised, insightful young man? I blinked back the mistiness prickling my eyes. Yes, exactly. And now it's up to us to carry that torch and continue his mission. Straightening my shoulders, I turned to fully face my son, cupping his cheek in my palm. Which is why I've decided to honor his memory by establishing the Coleman Family Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to researching and developing preventative behavioral programs for at-risk demographics. Understanding blossomed across Caleb's features, swiftly followed by that infectious grin I remembered so fondly from his childhood. "You mean?" I matched his smile with one of my own, feeling lighter than I had in years. "That's right. If there's even the slightest chance we can help other families avoid the ugliness and toxicity that plagued ours, then we owe it to your father's legacy to make that effort." For a long moment, neither of us spoke, simply basking in the prospect of authoring a new, brighter chapter free from the shackles of bitterness and anger. When Caleb finally broke the silence, his voice was thick with emotion. "He'd be proud of you, Mom, of both of us." I pulled him into a fierce embrace, feeling the contours of the man he had become pressed against me, Ethan's living legacy. "I think he would be too, sweetheart." My eyes found the carved epitaph, as if seeking benediction from beyond the veil. Because this is what it was always about, not punishing those blinded by their sins, but protecting and uplifting those still caught in darkness so they can find the light. Arm in arm, we turned and strode from the quiet peace of the memorial gardens, ready to face the future head-on with clear eyes and open hearts. The cycle of negativity and greed would end, and a new age of healing and positivity would beckon all those with the courage to seize it. It was time to carve a new legacy, built on the ashes of the old. One Ethan himself would be proud to call his own.
On a day that started like any other, Martha, a lady whose entire life had been centered around helping others, found herself in the most difficult situation of her life. She was in a doctor's office, sitting in an uncomfortable, stiff chair, her hands clasped together in a worried gesture. She was waiting for Dr. Freeman, an oncologist with a gentle manner and eyes that betrayed bad news, and the atmosphere was thick with tension. Dr. Freeman spoke tentatively at first. "Martha, the results of your tests have indicated that you have advanced stage cancer." The remarks greatly disturbed Martha's tranquility, falling into the workplace silence like stones into a serene lake. She felt as though a cloud had covered her mind and that the world had slowed down for a brief while. "What are the odds that I will survive?" Martha asked, barely able to speak above a tremulous murmur as she tried to gather herself. Dr. Freeman sighed, considering his next move with caution. "It's challenging to pinpoint, Martha. Although the likelihood is low, there are possibilities for intense treatment. We are discussing a regimen of radiation and chemotherapy, potentially with surgery in between. Not only will it be difficult, but there will be serious adverse consequences." A knot began to form in Martha's throat, but rather than giving in to hopelessness, something within her stoked a hidden spark of will. She raised her head and met the doctor's eyes with a fresh intensity. With increasing power in her voice, she said, "So we fight. I must try, no matter how slim my chances are for my family and myself. I refuse to surrender without a struggle." With a glimpse of appreciation in his eyes, Dr. Freeman nodded. "Martha, that's really brave of you. You won't do this by yourself. We'll exert every effort to combat this." Martha felt a strength come from within her at that very instant, in spite of the fear and uncertainty all around her. Armed with a ferocious determination to life, she was prepared to confront anything that came her way. She knew it would be a difficult path, but she also knew that every step she took to defend her life would be worthwhile. That evening, there was a lot of suspense and anxiety in Martha's living room. Her husband Daniel, a gentleman whose smile could lift anyone's spirits, was sitting on the couch, staring at Martha. The teen son of the marriage, Mark, whose excitement and vitality were the source of joy for the whole family, ceased his activities upon realizing the gravity of the situation. They both waited, uneasiness lingering in the air. Taking a deep breath, Martha summoned all the courage she had left. She spoke in a shaky but forceful voice. "Daniel, Mark, I have something very important to share with you." There was a deafening silence that seemed to come from the outer world, pausing to listen. "The physicians have determined that I have cancer, and it's advanced. It is a more evolved phase." The words hung there, fear and doubt weighing heavily on them. Daniel got up right away, his expression showing how shocked he was by those remarks. "Martha, my dear, how is this possible?" His voice was a meek, emotionally charged whisper. Mark, on the other hand, appeared still, his eyes wide as the situation gradually dawned on his impressionable mind. "You'll be all right, Mom." Normally exuding youthful assurance, his voice was now tinged with anxiety. With a look of love and resolve in her eyes, Martha turned to face the two. "I'm not going to lie. It's going to be a difficult battle, but I swear I'll give it my all. I'm not by myself either. As a family, we will tackle this together. No matter how hard this obstacle is, we can overcome it." Daniel stepped forward, throwing his arms around Martha in a show of strength and defense. "Every step of the journey, Martha, we're here for you. This will not be faced by you alone." As Mark joined in, the family grew stronger in the face of hardship. "Mom, we work together as a team. We'll work together to overcome this." Despite the emotional turbulence that evening, Martha's family discovered fresh strength in their bond. They were aware that the journey ahead would be difficult, but they also believed that by working together, they could overcome any obstacle. The commitment to battle and triumph over that obstacle as a team served as a lighthouse to help them navigate the impending storm. Martha's journey in her fight against cancer grew more difficult as the days stretched into weeks and the weeks into months. Not only did the rigorous and draining treatment wear her out, but it also affected her family. After providing steadfast support at first, Daniel and Mark started to feel the weight of the situation. Daniel, who has always been the family's pillar of support, became bogged down in a maze of new duties. He was worn out from visiting the hospital, taking care of Martha, and attempting to keep things somewhat normal for Mark. "How are we going to continue like this?" he murmured to himself one night as he was quietly preparing dinner. "Everything seems so altered." Mark, however, had to contend with his own inner conflict. His social life and academic performance started to suffer as a result of the demanding schedule and the gravity of the circumstances. In a rare instance of peace between them, Mark confessed to Martha about feeling cut off from his friends and the life he once led. "I miss the way things used to be, Mom. It's challenging, but I strive to be strong." Even though she was struggling herself, Martha could not help but notice the suffering her disease was causing to her family. She gathered Daniel and Mark in the living room on a particularly trying night. A room that had once been full of laughter but was now overshadowed by the reality of their circumstances. "I understand how difficult this is for you both," she said, her voice stifled with feeling. "And I really apologize for anything that we are experiencing. But just now more than ever, I need you." Daniel answered, "We know, love, and we're here," with tears still welling up in his eyes. Simply said, "It's harder than we anticipated." With a sincerity that only a young person can have, Mark continued, grasping his mother's hand. "Mom, I'll try to be stronger for you." The fissures in the family relations were exposed during the conversation that evening. There was an emotional gulf between them due to the reality of their new life, which was filled with uncertainty, worries, and treatments. As Martha's condition worsened and became a more controlling force in the family's life, Daniel and Mark were forced to make painful moral and emotional decisions. They started to feel the weight of the unforgiving and brutal reality of the situation in ways they had never anticipated. Daniel spoke up on a depressing afternoon when the home seemed to be filled with the sound of broken hearts. His voice trembled with a mixture of resolve and agony. "I simply cannot continue doing this anymore," he admitted, averting Martha's eyes. "It's breaking me down on the inside, and I know Mark is too. In order to rediscover who we are, we require some time and room to breathe." Mark, though young, carried in his eyes a burden far beyond his years. "Mom, I love you, but this is too hard. I feel like I'm losing myself," he said, the words coming out in a painful whisper. Faced with this unimaginable abandonment, Martha felt as though the last thread of hope had been ripped from her heart. However, amidst the storm of her desolation, she found unexpected anchors: her sister Beatrice and the nurse John. Beatrice, always the rock upon which Martha leaned, surged forth with unwavering strength and love. "Sister, I'm here," she said, gripping Martha's hands firmly. "No matter how difficult it gets, you won't face this alone. We'll get through this together." John, the nurse who had become a constant and comforting presence, offered not only his professional care, but also a friendly shoulder. "Martha, I see your struggle, and you're stronger than you think. I'm here to take care of you, to ensure you have everything you need." In this moment of abandonment and vulnerability, Martha found a new kind of family, one formed not only by blood ties, but also by bonds of compassion, care, and unconditional love. Beatrice and John became her pillars, offering her the support she needed to face each new day with hope and determination. They reminded her that even in the darkest hours, she was not alone. In the quietude of her darkest days, Martha felt the weight of loneliness like a heavy cloak upon her shoulders. The battle against cancer seemed like a steep and impassable mountain. Yet within her, a flame of resilience began to burn brighter, fueled by the solidarity of those few but invaluable who remained by her side. Among these pillars of support, John the nurse emerged as a central figure, not only as a caregiver, but as a true friend. In a particularly challenging afternoon, after an exhausting treatment session, Martha found herself engulfed in doubt and fear. It was then that John, sensing the shadow looming over her spirit, sat beside her, gently holding her hand. "Martha," he began with a voice soft yet firm, "I know the journey is tough and the path uncertain, but you're not alone in this fight. Your strength and courage are inspiring, and I'm here by your side every step of the way." Encouraged by John's words, Martha felt a renewal in her spirit. "Thank you, John," she replied, a glint of determination in her eyes. "Sometimes I feel lost in the midst of this storm, but knowing I have you and Beatrice with me gives me the strength to carry on. I won't let myself be defeated." Together, Martha and John faced each day as a new battle, an opportunity to defy despair and embrace hope. Treatment sessions, though grueling, became more bearable with John by her side, offering emotional support, attentive care, and above all, unwavering friendship. Martha's journey, though marked by adversity, was also a tale of incredible human strength and solidarity. Through the darkness of illness, she found light in the kindness and support of those who stood by her side, proving that even in the most challenging circumstances, solidarity and love for others can bring strength and hope. After a challenging period of battles and trials, Martha finally began to glimpse new horizons in her life. With the disease now in remission, she allowed herself to dream again, opening her heart to new experiences and possibilities. She continued with treatment, but didn't need to go to the hospital as often. So, she made the decision to move to a new neighborhood, and that was the first step in this journey of renewal. It was a Saturday morning, the sun bathing the streets with its golden light, when Martha, accompanied only by her hopes and dreams, crossed the threshold of her new home. The neighborhood was peaceful, the streets lined with trees whispering in the wind. Neighbors with welcoming smiles wasted no time in greeting her. In one of these warm welcomes, Martha met Helena, a lady with a gentle gaze and hands that carried the wisdom of someone who knows the land. "You'll see, dear," Helena said with a smile that illuminated her face. "This place has something special. People here have a unique way of connecting." It was Helena who introduced Martha to the world of gardening. On a sunny afternoon, while showing her own garden filled with colorful flowers and aromatic herbs, Helena shared, "Each plant here has its story, just like us. Taking care of them teaches me about patience, care, and above all, the beauty of transformation. Martha, touched by Helena's passion and wisdom, felt an immediate connection with the earth and its wonders. She started small, with a pot of daisies and one of lavender. Gradually, her garden began to bloom, and with it, her soul as well. I never imagined that the earth and plants could teach me so much about life, Martha reflected, her hands covered in soil, a contented smile on her lips. Gardening has brought me peace, a joy I didn't know was missing. It's as if by caring for these plants, I'm taking care of a part of me that had been neglected. Martha found in gardening not only a new passion, but also a form of meditation and connection with the world around her. Her days were now filled with the joy of seeing her plants grow, the peace of being outdoors, and the satisfaction of creating beauty with her own hands. With each new flower that bloomed, Martha felt her life gain more color and meaning, proving that even after the darkest periods, it's possible to rebuild, renew, and flourish again. She cherished those who never abandoned her, who stayed with her on her worst days. Whenever she could, she gathered with Jan and Beatrice to chat and keep the bonds of closeness. Years had passed since Daniel and Mark, driven by inexplicable selfishness, had left the family shattered. The memories of their actions, though distant, still echoed with a dark persistence. Moved by the news of Martha's success, Daniel decided to return, his mind numb with her achievements. On that day, the air was charged with the electricity of an impending storm, both meteorological and emotional. Daniel, with hesitant yet determined steps, crossed the threshold separating Martha's past from present, bringing with him clouds of past conflicts. Driven by a desire to mend ties he had severed with his own hands, he found Martha in her garden, a sanctuary of peace she had cultivated with the same care she had used to rebuild her life. "Martha," Daniel began, his voice trembling, revealing the internal storm consuming him. "I know I have no right to just show up like this after so long, but I needed to see you. I needed to try to make amends for the past." Martha, surprised by Daniel's sudden appearance, rose from where she had been kneeling among the flowers, wiping her hands on her skirt. Her gaze, though calm, carried the strength of waves that resist and shape the rocks around them. "Daniel," she replied, maintaining a distance that was more emotional than physical. "The past is not a broken vase that can simply be glued back together. What's done is done, and I've built a new life, a life that has no room for what tore us apart." The honesty in Martha's words hit Daniel like a lightning bolt, illuminating the reality he had been trying to avoid, that some actions are irreversible and that forgiveness doesn't always rebuild burnt bridges. "But Martha, I've changed," Daniel insisted, hopelessness beginning to tinge his voice. "Is there something I can do to—" "To what, Daniel? To turn back time?" "We both know that's impossible," Martha interrupted, her voice firm but not devoid of compassion. "You need to understand that sometimes facing the past means accepting that it doesn't define our future. My future doesn't include you." The conversation, though brief, was a tense encounter, a clash between Daniel's desire to re-enter Martha's life out of greed and the unyielding reality of the new existence she had forged for herself. Confronted with the truth in Martha's words, Daniel felt the weight of his past actions more than ever. Martha, though shaken by the attempted invasion of her present by the past, remained steadfast, a living testament to her own resilience. In the end, Daniel left, but he didn't accept defeat. The next day, he found a lawyer to file a lawsuit against Martha, demanding that she include him and Mark in her will. Upon learning about the lawsuit filed by her son and husband, who had abandoned her, Martha was extremely hurt, but she didn't falter. She then decided to countersue them, filing for divorce, citing abandonment of a vulnerable person, and alleging that they only returned for money. She also sought damages for all the turmoil of their abandonment and their return after years. It was on a night when the blue light of police sirens cut through the darkness, reflecting on the tense faces of everyone involved, that Daniel and Mark, until then immersed in their own justifications, found themselves abruptly confronted by the reality of their actions. The arrival of the police, an impartial and determined force, marked the beginning of a new phase, one where the consequences of their actions could no longer be ignored. "Gentlemen, you are under investigation," announced the officer, his voice firm and authoritative, cutting through the tense air. "Every action has consequences, and it's time to face them." Daniel, his face pale under the intermittent light, exchanged a frightened look with Mark. This is a misunderstanding," he stammered, trying in vain to find an escape in the web of lies they had woven. Mark, on the other hand, remained silent, the reality of his choices finally settling in his heavy heart. Amidst this chaos, Martha, though torn apart by pain and betrayal, rose with a strength she didn't know she possessed. The decision to move forward with the complaint didn't come easy. Every word of the testimony reopened wounds she desperately tried to heal. However, driven by a visceral need for justice for the suffering caused, she spoke. "I need justice to be served," Martha told the officer, her voice trembling but determined. "It's not just for me, but for everyone who has suffered at the hands of people who think they can get away with it. They abandoned me in the worst phase of my life and disappeared for years. Now they return and claim they have the right to my money. That's unacceptable." Martha's defiance, her refusal to let the deeds of those who hurt her define her, was what made her courageous in the face of hardship. Martha started down the path of healing, bolstered by her pursuit of justice, while Daniel and Mark dealt with the legal fallout from their deeds and an uncertain future. For the culprits and the victim alike, the police involvement that evening marked the close of a troubling chapter and the start of a fresh one. It served as a sobering reminder to Daniel and Mark that no question goes unanswered. It was a promise to Martha that justice may bring closure and the chance to move forward one step at a time, even in the face of suffering and betrayal. The lawsuit against Daniel and Mark developed little by bit as the days stretched into weeks and the weeks into months. Every hearing and every statement served as a continual reminder of the decisions they had made and the dire repercussions of those decisions that now faced them. Martha, meantime, observed from a distance, a bystander in a conflict she had courageously decided to take on. Over coffee one tranquil afternoon, Martha confided in her sister Beatrice, "I never imagined it would come to this. But somehow, facing all of this has made me stronger." Her sister nodded encouragingly as she listened carefully. "Martha, you have such incredible bravery. Few people could get the courage to accomplish what you have." Martha thought about those remarks. It had been a difficult road with many times of uncertainty and hopelessness. Nevertheless, she had discovered pieces of herself along the road that she was unaware of. Despite its cruelty, adversity had been a harsh but fair teacher. She looked out to the horizon and said, "I've learned so much. About justice, about resilience, and about the value of moving forward no matter how difficult the path." Martha sensed a chapter of her life coming to an end as Daniel and Mark were now negotiating the rough seas of the judicial system. Even though it wasn't quite a joyful ending, she was able to go on and start laying fresh groundwork for her life. She devoted her life to causes close to her heart and found fulfillment in supporting those going through similar hardships. Every individual she helped and every life she touched served as a reminder that hope existed even in the most hopeless situations. Most significantly, she opened her heart to new possibilities by allowing herself to love and be loved once more. As she confidently declared, "What happened shouldn't affect me," Martha felt the soft morning breeze caressing her face as she strolled across the park. "It's just a part of my story, and I decide how the rest will be written." Martha carried on with her life, giving herself over to people and things that really mattered, grateful for the lessons she had learned and the strength she had discovered in adversity. Though she was aware that there might still be difficulties along the way, she felt prepared to confront them with the confidence that, in the end, all would work out. After reading about Martha's journey, you may be wondering how you may overcome hardship and change your own life. Martha's tale is just one illustration of how obstacles can guide us toward progress and self-discovery. I have something unique for you if Martha's story has inspired you, and you would like to read more tales like hers. Announcing the ebook, a meticulously selected compilation of 49 stories, one for every day, called 7 Weeks of Inspiration, is intended to lead you on a path of self-exploration and metamorphosis. Every day for 4 weeks includes not just a narrative, but also a thought-provoking question, a prayer to uplift your soul, and a practical task to help you apply the lessons to your everyday life. The best part is that you may become even more fully immersed in the stories when you buy the ebook, because it includes both the written and narrated versions. You'll also get 3 exclusive goodies that will enhance your transformational experience. Don't pass up the chance to start this life-changing adventure. To receive your 7 weeks of inspiration, click the link below. Every day of your life, give yourself permission to be inspired and transformed. Narratives have the power to inspire and move. Please remember to like and share if you liked this. In the following story, I'll see you. Do you still exist? I was astounded by what I saw when I went to my son's residence. I gasped when I was met with a startling sight in my son's home. There, shackled and malnourished, was my missing 5-year-old grandchild in the living room. The room was filled with discarded plastic bottles and empty bread bags. I hurried to offer him water in my hurry, but he angrily objected, saying, "Give it to my sister first." "Your sibling? Who is this woman?" Perplexed, I asked. Then I heard a baby's weak screams coming from a corner of the room. Before long, the startling reality was revealed. I made up my mind to punish the hell out of whoever it was who made my grandchild go through this. "Do you want to lend me money again?" I sounded off over the phone to my son in a frustrated tone. My spouse went away at the age of 62 3 years ago. I've been living alone ever since. I never had any financial issues because I worked for a long time and received a sizable inheritance from my husband. But for now, my son Thomas, who moved out already, is my biggest worry. Even as a working adult, he has always been irresponsible. He frequently demonstrated bad work ethics, carried work-related materials home, and slept in excessively. His work history was characterized by frequent job changes and sporadic requests for financial assistance. Even though I was disappointed in my own son, I couldn't give up on him entirely because of my familial ties. Suddenly one day, Thomas and a woman arrived at our house. "Mom, I'm going to marry this girl." Startled, I greeted the attractive young woman. I said, "Hello, I'm Ain." "Ain, nice to meet you. However, getting hitched so quickly? It surprises me." Thomas, who was chewing gum, laughed. "Well, what can you do when you get pregnant?" She then said, "I'm 4 months pregnant," and gave her belly a little pat. Despite my amazement, I managed to offer my congratulations and bid my son and his spouse farewell. Pregnancy, despite the altered order, is a pleasant event. I'm wondering if they too could properly raise a child because I'm going to have a grandchild. I felt conflicted. When I finally went to see Thomas and his family at their house, I was shocked. The interior appeared to have been looted by a thief. There were cup noodle cups and empty convenience shop meal containers all over the place. I was compelled to cry out, "What in the world is this mess? Are you eating healthily, Anne? Now it's more than just your body. Shall we cook together now that I have some veggies?" My daughter-in-law, who had a slightly bigger tummy, twisted her face in response. "Ugh, cooking is such a hassle," was her reply. "But you need proper nutrition," I started to add, but Thomas cut me off abruptly. "An annoying mother-in-law who nags all the time won't be like you know. Quit making fun of my wife." "I have no intent of doing that," I said. I brought some veggies, and Anne pushed them toward me. "Please don't make needless comments. I really don't need this kind of thing," she continued. "You really irritate me." That day I had no choice but to silently withdraw under their scathing condemnation. When the time came for her to give birth, the two of them came to show me the child. My expression softened as I gazed at my grandchild swaddled in a blanket. "How sweet." "I take it that it's a boy. What is his name?" "Harry is his name." "But Mom, you have something to give us, don't you?" "Yeah, well, you're correct. It's a modest present for the new baby." I gave the envelope to her. Anne grabbed it quickly and looked inside. "Tom, there's $1,300 in here," she cried out. My son smiled. "Fantastic. Perhaps I should pamper myself." My son and daughter-in-law didn't seem to be listening when I tried to tell them to spend the money for the baby. My son then turned to face me. "You know, Mom, it's getting tight in here with the baby and everything. We are considering moving into your empty house." At the time, I had recently moved into a fairly priced apartment from the house that I shared with my spouse. We were debating whether to rent it out or sell the house. Money is undoubtedly needed to raise children, and maybe having a home would allow for more carefree parenting. Thinking about that, I gave a nod. "I recognize. You are free to occupy the space and pay no rent." My youngster said, "I'm grateful. Should we relocate the following month?" But Anne, who had listened to all of this, said something. I heard her say, "But please don't come to our house." Surprised, I stumbled and said, "Huh?" "Please leave us alone. We don't want any interference," Thomas went on. "I comprehend," I answered. As a result, I was only able to go to my son and daughter-in-law's home when it was absolutely necessary. I would sometimes get in touch with them to go out to dinner, and when I did, they would grudgingly let me see Harry, but it was obvious they would rather be left alone. My grandchild was nevertheless developing nicely, and had even begun referring to me as Grandma. But as usual, right before Harry turned 4, I got a message from my son telling me that I wanted to bring Harry's snack when I messaged him. "Anne doesn't want to see you anymore," he stated. "Please stop doing this and avoid visiting our home. You are unable to enter as we have changed the locks." His biased remark shocked me and made me angry. However, I opted to watch the scenario for a little, in case I accidentally insulted Anne without recognizing it. But in the process, I lost track of when I should have been at my son's place, and eventually stopped going entirely. Every now and again, for whatever reason, I would get hesitant, terse responses from Thomas. "Harry is 5 years old already, is he not? I hope all is good with him." I carried on with my lonely life in spite of my concerns. Then one day I received a call from an unknown number. The voice on the other end said, "I would like to request repayment of your son's debt." When I answered. After some more discussion, I realized that my son had unilaterally added me as a co-guarantor. I had previously been requested for financial assistance, but I had never anticipated anything like this. I tried to get in touch with Thomas right away, but I got no response. Normally, after some time, I would get a response, but this time was different. I went to my son's place, frustrated. I hit the intercom button, but nobody picked up. I called several times, but the line never went through. Everything stayed the same, even when I shifted the times of my trips. This continued for a few days before I started to worry. Is it possible that they vanished? In what location are they? I looked around for any hints. Thomas had quit. They told me when I went to his place of employment. The neighbors had no idea where they were either. It was already a full week after my first visit. I thought about calling the police, but I thought I should try their residence one more time first. I hit the intercom button, but nothing came out. It was locked and I could not open the front door. I sighed and turned to go when I heard a slight thump coming from within the home. It seemed like something had moved. In desperation, I cried out, "Is there anyone inside? Please reveal your face." However, no one replied. But I was attracted by the sound coming from inside, and I wondered if I could enter the house somehow. At that moment, I saw something I had missed the last time I was there. The garden-side casement window's latch was open. I went in nervously and saw something that made me scream in terror. My 5-year-old grandson, Harry, was crouching and chained in such position. "Are you alive?" I cried out and hurried over to his side. Harry was surrounded by broken plastic bottles and empty bread bags in the dilapidated room. "Grandma, did you come to rescue me?" he muttered. "What in the world is going on here? Let's get you some water first." I ran to get some water and tried to give it to Harry, who was still in his chain. Then he let out a cry. "Give it to my sister first." "Your sister? Who's your sister?" In the next moment, I heard a feeble cry from the corner of the room. As I turned my gaze in that direction, I accidentally dropped the cup I was holding. To my astonishment, there lay an about 3-month-old baby. The shock of discovering this infant's existence overwhelmed me more than the distressing sight of my grandson, Harry. Both Harry and the baby appeared weakened. Desperate to help, I unfastened Harry's chain, placed him and the baby in the car, and rushed to the hospital. The examination results indicated that both individuals were suffering from malnutrition. When the doctor asked, "May I inquire about the circumstances?" I was unable to respond because I hadn't been involved with my son and daughter-in-law for some time. Harry and the baby were scheduled to be hospitalized for a few days, and subsequently, the police arrived after receiving a report from the hospital. When questioned by the police, I honestly conveyed that my son and daughter-in-law were missing. Harry, who was receiving intravenous fluids, was also asked various questions, but he appeared too frightened to say anything. After the police left, I approached my visibly calmer grandchild and asked, "Where are Mom and Dad?" They said they were going abroad. They packed their big bags and left. What Harry began to speak in fragments about the situation, Mimi, my granddaughter, was born about 4 months ago. Harry was taught how to prepare milk and change diapers, and he took care of her. Then, an unsettling revelation followed. Harry was told, "We'll keep you tethered to the care of your sister so you won't escape before leaving on a trip. Even if the doorbell rings," I was told not to answer. As I stood there, frozen and covering my mouth, my grandchild burst into tears. Mimi had learned to roll over, and during one of Harry's naps, she managed to venture out of his reach. My trembling grandchild confessed, "I didn't know what to do, and I was so scared." I held him tightly as tears streamed down his face. Once I confirmed that Harry was asleep, I returned to the house where my son's family lived, intending to retrieve their belongings. I still wanted to think that Thomas and his wife were real at that point. Did they actually leave the kids behind and travel overseas? It is not possible. Harry must have misinterpreted something. A trip brochure on the table caught my attention as I was about to depart after packing the grandchildren's change of clothes into a bag. The cover said, "Elegant 2-week overseas cruise." I shook as I picked it up. A single sheet of paper with our travel itinerary for the two of us peeled out from between its pages. The congrats for making it through the delivery journey were extremely specific, mentioning that the money source was borrowed and that an elderly hag served as a co-guarantor. When I realized they had taken a trip, I was enraged to have put my grandchildren through this while they were merely taking a vacation. It is not human. I will never be able to forgive them, whether or not it is my son. I decided to give them a severe punishment. It was evident from looking over their itinerary that they were due back 3 days later. I got up and went to take care of stuff without thinking twice. 3 days later, I watched from the darkness outside their home as Thomas and Eileen turned, beaming with pride as they dragged bulky suitcases. Whoa, that was a lot of fun. Additionally, the food was excellent. Yes, it was very amazing. I appreciate you taking me, Tom. I'm not ready to go back yet. Let's go out soon again. They were talking as they turned the corner to the street where our house was, and they froze in disbelief. What's going on here, hey? What took place? Everything they owned had been hauled out and piled up in front of the house. I said just this, in a daze of shock and shock. It was me in front of the two of them. Did you enjoy your trip? Thomas seemed surprised to see me when I inquired. What the heck is going on, old hag? I'm asking if the overseas trip that subjected your own children to such experiences was enjoyable. My son and daughter-in-law cringed at the sound of my harsh voice, but they quickly counterattacked. Did we not warn you to stay away from our house? Did you simply walk in? I exhaled. I would not have continued if I hadn't been unintentionally appointed a co-guarantor, and I gave in when I saw that window open. Furthermore, I am the owner of this house. So, is there a problem? Eileen appeared surprised by the change in her expression. The in-law's daughter cried out, "Wait a second, where are the kids? Let's examine them." I answered, "The kids are in the hospital right now. The hospital is taking care of them." Their expressions suddenly showed surprise when they heard my response. You provided them with food and drink, but not enough of either. They were out of supplies when I found them. Hospitalization was unavoidable due to their inadequate dietary status. I went on. In addition, Mimi has mastered the art of rolling over and has moved out of Harry's grasp while wearing a chain. She might not have survived if I hadn't found her in time. Eileen's embarrassed look was quite visible when I spoke harshly, but Thomas gave me a hard time. It's okay, since in the end, they're still living. But that's all about the house for now. Then, why are the possessions outside? I have no intention of allowing you to live here after such heinous acts, I said. Please go. I've chosen to list this house for sale. My son and daughter-in-law were astonished to hear this and started berating me. Old hag, stop being so foolish. Such despotism is not going to stand. I calmly retorted. Even if there is a home, you won't be able to return for a while. The son and daughter-in-law simultaneously yelled, "What?" at that moment. Just then, the far-off cry of a police siren got closer. If you answered, "Did you report us?" Then they have. I handled it earlier since the police told me to tell them when you got back after your kids were brought to the hospital, I stated matter-of-factly, maintaining the same look. My daughter-in-law started to quiver, and her face went pale, and I stared. What should we do, Tom? Will we be taken into custody? Dealing with the police is more than I can handle. Thomas clutched to me happily at that moment. Mom, please help us to resolve this. Tell them we're not guilty. We'll perform better going forward, I swear. Please. Tears and mucus stained Eileen's face as she spoke, Please, I beg you." And so, with unflinching resolve, I made my decision. "I will not pardon you. I cut all links to my family today. There is no denying the crime you have committed against your children. Think about it and offer an apology." The son and daughter-in-law mumbled as they sagged in their chairs. However, a police vehicle pulled up right then, and I observed them being brought away with a detached sense. Following their police interrogation, Thomas and Eileen were found guilty. They spent a considerable amount of time in custody, and even when they were eventually freed, they had nowhere to go. I filed for custody of my 2 grandchildren through the judicial system. My son and daughter-in-law opposed it, but I eventually won because their actions were scrutinized. They currently reside in an unstable, dilapidated flat after moving far away. It's doubtful that they'll find steady work again after this occurrence, considering the media attention it received. However, I don't feel sorry for them. However, I am raising my 2 grandkids with all of my heart. Mimi is at her cute phase and has started talking. Harry assists with home tasks. Despite my busy life, I feel that every day is meaningful because of my grandchildren. I'll keep up my health maintenance and try my hardest for these priceless grandchildren. How did you come upon this tale? Please think about subscribing to our channel if you liked it. Till then, in our upcoming video. When 2 people unite in marriage, they make a solemn commitment to one another's eternal love and faithfulness. However, this does not always occur in a loving manner in some circumstances. There are times when everything can end abruptly at the altar, frequently with no warning of what will happen. We shall talk about a case when this occurred in this article. After 4 years of dating, getting engaged, and being fully dedicated to one another, Peter and Jasmine were a couple. Both of their families appeared to be in favor of the relationship, and they appeared to love each other very much. Everything was moving smoothly. Jasmine was unaware, nevertheless, that her fiancé Peter was having a covert liaison with Annabelle. Even though Peter and Jasmine had been having an affair for 2 years, they never stopped. Jasmine believed she had found the love of her life in Peter, and she loved him with all of her heart. Because he didn't want to be perceived as blatantly disloyal and thought of Annabelle as merely a fleeting fling, Peter was ready to call it quits on his relationship with her and move on with Jasmine. However, Annabelle broke the news to Peter a few weeks before the wedding. She was expecting a kid, and the child was his. Peter was feeling a lot of different things at the same time. However, he felt that his child needed a father figure and chose to live with Annabelle. In the end, this helped them become closer. The unfaithful couple vowed to be together forever and to use their child as a unifying force in their love vows. When the big day for Peter and Jasmine's marriage finally arrived, everyone was anticipating it. Unaware of what was about to happen, Jasmine's friends and family watched her with glee as she was filled with excitement and happiness. After an hour, Jasmine began to worry about the groom's tardiness. The phone finally rang, and Jasmine picked it up. Peter was the voice on the other end of the call, apologizing profusely, "But we are unable to get married to Jasmine. I'm running away with another woman because I love her too. I truly apologize. I hope you find happiness. We're expecting a baby and she's carrying it. My child will not be left fatherless." Jasmine was horrified and heartbroken. "Peter, how can you be such a scoundrel?" she asked over the phone. "You are abhorrent. You have been lying to me all along." "I'm so sorry, Jasmine," Peter retorted, trembling. "This is not how I wanted things to be. Although I had a covert relationship with Annabelle, I never abandoned you." After experiencing emotional confusion, I realized that I loved Annabelle and that I would live with her and my child. Please pardon me. I hope you find happiness and that you come across a man who genuinely loves you. To continue lying to both you and me would not be just. I apologize, Jasmine. I did everything for you, and this is how you repay me, Jasmine sobbed. All right, let me just tell you this. Everything in this world is repayable, and life will eventually charge you for the harm you caused me. This is fate, not a curse. Jasmine looked dejected and melancholy as she hung up on Peter. To everyone here, it is with great sadness that I announce there will be no wedding, she said to the guests. Over the phone, the groom ended our relationship and fled with his expectant partner. Peter is a shameless man and a disgrace. He tricked me, making me appear foolish. I apologize to all of you. You can leave now. It's okay if you wish to return the presents you received. Everyone at the time was sympathetic toward Jasmine because of her shattered heart and devastation. Jasmine's suffering was never their intention, and Peter's family expressed their regret for what had transpired. Jasmine said her fiancé's family farewell after realizing they were not at blame. With the assistance of her own family, she exited the event while still wearing her bridal gown. Jasmine's parents and siblings helped her through all of the hardships she endured. Her pals were there for her as well. Peter and Annabelle, in the meantime, boarded an aircraft at an airport on the opposite side of town and relocated to a different state in order to avoid the judgmental and hurtful looks they would likely receive from onlookers. After living their lives, Peter and Annabelle started a family. Jasmine sobbed, completely broken-hearted by the unfulfilled nuptials. She started to feel more and more down and unhappy. 3 years later, Jasmine recovered with the support of her loved ones and friends following multiple psychiatric treatments. She began studying, working at a corporation, going to the gym, and running. She met Nick, a young, stylish, gorgeous, and sophisticated man from a wealthy family who controlled the company, one day at her new job. He was extremely modest and honorable, in spite of his wealth and high social standing. Nick's secretary, Jasmine, received excellent treatment from him. He always treated everyone equally and justly, never abusing his position of authority to degrade or mistreat his staff members or subordinates. Jasmine was proud of her middle-class upbringing and didn't try to hide it. Nick seemed to really enjoy Jasmine, and he started to feel something for her over time. Thus, one day, Nick bravely greeted Jasmine by saying, "Hello, Jasmine. Do you want to accompany me on a date? Perhaps get together someday?" His request touched and honored Jasmine. She accepted out of deference to her boss, even though she wasn't seeking a relationship because of the fallout from being left on the altar and her diminished faith in men. Her preference was to have a single life. Nick tried to respect her feelings by not pressuring her after noticing her lack of interest. But her lack of interest just strengthened his resolve. As a result of his persistent efforts, their friendship developed. Nick invited Jasmine over for supper because he was growing more and more in love with her and wanted to win her heart. "Jasmine, I've been in love with you since the first time I saw you," Nick then declared his sentiments. "You are constantly on my mind. Are you going to be my girlfriend?" Though shocked and astonished by Nick's offer, Jasmine said, "I'm very honored, Nick, but you come from a high position, and I'm from a simple, humble family, with hesitation and shaking. Unlike you, I was not born into a wealthy family, and I don't have any titles. Are you certain about this?" "Jasmine, my parents were middle class like you, and they fought hard to get where they are." Nick smiled in response. "I learned a lot of principles from them. I owe them for the excellent childhood they gave me because of them, and I am the amazing person I am now. I want to see you happy, because I love you." After fostering feelings for Nick for some time, Jasmine chose to take a gamble on herself and accepted Nick's proposal. Jasmine got along well with Nick's mixed-race parents and brothers, and he seemed to like her. Peter was living his idyllic life in another state with Annabelle and their child, longing his family, but also being afraid of their reaction should he go back to his native state. After 2 years, Nick asked Jasmine to marry him while kneeling in front of his parents and brothers at his home. He did this by displaying a wedding ring to her. "Be the woman of my dreams and my spouse." When Jasmine saw the wedding ring, she experienced mixed emotions. When Nick noticed Jasmine's expression, he inquired, "What's wrong, my love? Have I erred in some way? Tell me what's wrong, and I'll take care of it immediately." "No, Nick, you didn't do anything wrong, but seeing this ring brought back memories," remarked a moved Jasmine. Nick's mom inquired, "What happened, sweetheart?" "Explain it to us. Whatever it is will help," Nick added. "Tell us, my love. We're here to listen. Whatever it is, we'll understand." So Jasmine told her entire story about her wedding, where she was abandoned at the altar. Her unfaithful fiancé had run away with his pregnant mistress, and all her suffering followed. Nick and his family were moved by Jasmine's story and felt very sorry for her. Nick then opened up to Jasmine and said, "My love, I know how you feel. I've been through that too, and I know what it's like." Surprised, Jasmine said, "What do you mean, Nick? Someone in your position and with your status, who has everything, couldn't possibly go through that. My God, the world is so small." Nick emotionally replied, "I was about to get married 3 years before I met you. My future wife left me at the altar and ran away with an ex-boyfriend. Everything you suffered, I also suffered. I had depression, cried a lot, and even lost the meaning of my own life. But thanks to my family, I recovered, and now I'm here. I know how you feel because I felt it too." Jasmine held Nick's hand, and in front of his family, confident that she had found true love, she accepted his proposal. After 6 months of preparation for the big occasion, Nick was at the altar, waiting for his beloved. Jasmine arrived in a beautiful dress, and in front of all the guests, they got married. Their families were emotional. 3 months later, Jasmine was pregnant, which left Nick overjoyed. The happiness of motherhood and fatherhood made the couple very happy. Meanwhile, Peter and Annabelle were living their fairy tale, but they were about to be surprised. One day, Annabelle and Peter were at their home when someone knocked on the door. To their surprise, a ghost from Annabelle's past appeared in her life. It was a man named Blake. Nervously, Annabelle said, "I can't believe it. How did you find me, and what are you doing here, you idiot?" Also nervous, Blake replied, "It doesn't matter how I found you. Where's our son? I want to see our son." Screaming, Annabelle said, "Get out of here! Leave now!" However, Blake grabbed Annabelle and said, "It doesn't matter. I want both of you. You and our son. I love you both." Blake hugged Annabelle and kissed her on the mouth. At that moment, Peter arrived and saw the scene, saying, "Annabelle, what are you doing with this guy? I want an explanation." At that moment, Blake sarcastically said to Annabelle and Peter, "You traded me for this guy, a guy who left his fiancée at the altar and is raising another man's child. What an idiot you are." Angry, Peter tried to confront Blake, but Annabelle tried to calm them down. Mockingly and sarcastically, Blake said to Peter, "That boy you're raising isn't your son. I'm the real father of this child." Surprised, Peter said, "Annabelle, tell me this is a lie." Annabelle was stuttering nervously and was at a loss for words. Blake went on, "In actuality, this woman was with you for the entire time to take advantage of you financially. A DNA test is an option. She kept the pregnancy a secret from me. I learned of it from a friend. Although she was with us both, I am the true father." Peter's world fell apart at that same moment, and all he had ever believed in was a massive lie. Peter blurted out, "Annabelle, how could you do this? To be with you, I deserted my future wife at the altar. This is how you pay me back for leaving everything for you and running away to another state." Annabel sobbed and added, "Remember the boy. Nothing is the fault of him." "Enough, Annabel," Peter shot back. "I will no longer be manipulated by you. This is the child's biological father. I don't have to provide for a child that isn't mine. However, since I gave you this house as a gift and it is registered in your name, you are free to keep it. But I'm done helping out financially. I'm sorry I left Jasmine, a lovely woman, for someone like you. I'm returning to my native state in order to locate Jasmine and beg her pardon. The game of manipulation is over, Annabel. I hope to never see you again. Leave my life now." After going to the bedroom to pack his things, Peter walked out of the house. He acknowledged the boy's innocence as he bid him farewell. That's where Annabel and Blake ended up. Annabel turned down Blake's attempt at an embrace, angry that her plot had been uncovered. Peter took another aircraft ride back to his home state, where he witnessed the results of his deeds. His family rejected him, his friends abandoned him, and all of this rejection made him unhappy. He was crying and pleading for someone to tell him about Jasmine, but no one would speak. When he went to apologize to Jasmine's family, they mercilessly threw him out. He only had one buddy who provided him Jasmine's address and warned him not to believe what he saw. In an attempt to win Jasmine back and seek her forgiveness, Peter paid her a visit. When Peter arrived, he discovered that the location was a mansion. Jasmine was massaging her tummy, which was 7 months pregnant. "Peter, it's been a while, huh?" replied Jasmine, who was taken aback when Peter knocked on the door. "You abandoned me at the altar and fled with your pregnant mistress, and I haven't seen you since." Peter, on his knees and in sobs, said, "Jasmine, my love, I came to ask for your forgiveness and a new chance to start over." But Jasmine's belly caught Peter's attention, and he announced, "You're pregnant." Jasmine answered politely and gently, "Yeah, I'm 7 months pregnant. I will become a mother." Peter was saddened and deeply saddened by what he saw. "And your child with your mistress Annabel?" Jasmine inquired. "You are the father, right?" Peter sobbed, saying, "That child wasn't mine. Annabel did me a favor. No, I wasn't the dad. All of it was a plot orchestrated by that miserable woman." Jasmine apologized to Peter. "I met an incredible man who genuinely loves me, and as you could see, I'm getting married and happy now," Peter said humbly, on his knees. "Please forgive me, Jasmine. Return to me. We cherish one another. Like I mentioned, Annabel tricked me. It was not my child. I swear that after this, nothing will be the same, and I won't ever lie to you or cheat on you again. I now understand your feelings upon learning about Annabel's treachery. Let go of this person. If need be, I'll even take care of this kid that's developing inside of you like it's my own. I'll stop at nothing to win your trust again. You are still loved by me. I am aware that you are my ideal woman. I've been thinking about you nonstop." Jasmine answered kindly, "Peter, I don't love you anymore, but I did forgive you a long time ago. I've suffered so much because of you. I'm genuinely happy now. I apologize. I hope everything in your life turns out well and that you find new love. Please don't return to this page now. The idea of my ex-fiancé troubling us at our door may not sit well with my hubby. Peter, goodbye. May God bless you, and I send you my best wishes." With deliberate slowness, Jasmine shut the door and entered her home. Peter was so unhappy and heartbroken that he sobbed uncontrollably at Jasmine's doorstep. He was overcome with regret when he recalled what Jasmine had said the day he and Annabel had fled, realizing that life had held him accountable for what he had done to her. Jasmine gave birth to a boy once her pregnancy was over, which delighted Nick and Jasmine. Everyone was content. Peter was forced to bear the costs of his decision in the interim. His acquaintances severed their links with him, no lady desired to be engaged with him, and his family shunned him. Peter was left alone and without company. Peter traveled to a different city and to the closest bus station, missing Jasmine every day and preserving a photo of her from their engagement days as a keepsake. The lesson from this tale is to never exchange a genuine love for a person who could cheat and mislead you. It's possible that the one who actually loves you has moved on, leaving only regret and sorrow in their wake. The phrase, "love endures all things," doesn't allude to betrayal and infidelity. Rather, it refers to hardships, suffering, and tribulations. My friends, I sincerely hope you enjoyed this tale. View additional stories that show up on your screen by visiting our channel. Remember to hit like and subscribe. Till the following video.
The laughter and music that filled the air made the perfect setting for what was supposed to be the best day of my life. My name is Rachel, and I looked amazing in my white gown, making me feel like a princess. Everything seemed fantastic to me. That brief yet happy moment was gone in an instant. "Rachel, dear, could you come here for a moment?" My mother-in-law's speech broke the festive atmosphere. It was sharp and bordering on authoritarian. As I walked up to my mother-in-law, I saw that she was standing quite stiffly. But I still managed to smile at my friends and excuse myself. Her grin was too small for her eyes, and her posture was clearly tight. "What is it, Mrs. Paul?" I asked, trying to come across as calm and nice. "It's all about the way you look at me, Rachel," she said, her tone cold and accusing. "I am aware of the look of scorn that is emblazoned on your face. I should be treated with respect, not disrespect, as your husband's mother." I was taken aback by her statement. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what she had said. "I believe you have a misunderstanding, Mrs. Paul." I reply out of nothing but deference to you. I was confused for a while. "Respect, huh?" she mocked, her brows narrowing. "I see how you roll your eyes at me and sigh when I say something. Do you think I'm not seeing it? Even my kids have vanished due to your deceit." She was yelling louder now, and I sensed that other people were starting to turn to watch us. It was hard for me to keep my cool. Before I could respond, my husband Kyle materialized by our side, his worried-looking forehead wrinkled. After a quick look at each of us, he asked, "Mom, what's going on here?" "Kyle, your partner," Mrs. Paul retorted, her voice shaking with emotion. "She's been nothing but disrespectful to me. She's been looking down on me, and today of all days, she's been the worst." Tears filled her eyes, and she tightened her grip on Kyle's arm. "Rachel, is this true?" Kyle asked, his expression displaying a mix of doubt and confusion. His gaze swept over mine, waiting for an answer. "No, it's not true," I stated clearly and quietly. "I haven't treated her badly at all. She is not being truthful." "You're lying, Rachel," Mrs. Paul yelled, gripping Rachel's arm more tightly. "I am your mother. May I tell you a falsehood?" Tears were now running down her face, adding to the drama that was unfolding before all of them. For a moment, the world seemed to slow down. Kyle's worried expression turned to fury. Without warning, he lifted his hand and slapped me hard across the face. The room became still as the explosion continued, and I remained still, instinctively grabbing for my burned cheek. No one in the area stood up, but everyone around gasped in shock. I was feeling sad, betrayed, and angry all at once. I was at a loss for words, much alone how to reply. I questioned in a whisper, not really addressing anyone in particular. How could you? I was doubting the universe overall, as well as Kyle and his mother, as if I was looking for an explanation for this nightmare I had fallen into. Kyle stammered when he realized what he had done and murmured, "I'm sorry, Rachel. I was just that." But I interrupted him abruptly. "No," I answered, keeping my cool and being tough despite my inner turmoil. "You've shown me exactly who you are." The physical blow was not nearly as painful as the hurt I felt when I realized my freshly married partner was capable of such actions. I turned away from them both, knowing that at that moment everything had changed. I turned to face the visitors. Most of them were still staring at me in stunned stillness. Despite my beating heart, I said, "I'm sorry you had to witness this," with composure. "Please don't stop enjoying the celebrations. I require some alone time." I walked out of the room before I got a response. The music had stopped and the laughter had died down. The world outside seemed so different, and the happiness and excitement of the day seemed like a faraway memory. As soon as I found a quiet spot away from the hubbub and loudness, my mind was buzzing with ideas about what had just happened. How could everything have fallen apart so quickly? Just a few seconds earlier, I was ecstatic, believing that I was beginning a new chapter in my life. I had the impression that everything had significantly changed in my reality. It was all too much to take. The accusations from my mother-in-law, the smack from Kyle, and the disapproving looks from the visitors. I needed time to think things through and process everything. Was I really supposed to stay in this marriage after all that had happened? Would Kyle ever earn my trust again? The questions were weighing heavily on my mind as I stood there feeling lost and unsure of what to do next. But one thing was for sure. My life had changed, and it would never be the same. My perfect day was gone, to be replaced by something darker and more painful. Finding the best line of action was my duty at hand, even if it meant working alone. I turned to face the group and heard the murmuring start from behind. However, I refused to let that affect me. I kept my head held high, knowing that this was not the end for me. Instead, it signaled the beginning of something new. My mind was racing, trying to come up with a plan. This humiliation would not remain unretaliated. I would like compensation for what happened today. I stepped into the serenity of the bridal suite and allowed myself to feel the emotions I had been holding at bay. Tears filled my cheeks, but not just any old painful ones. And those were tears of determination. I won't give up right now. I wouldn't want to fall prey. I would triumph over this and come out on top. I had never been more determined. After what had happened, I knew I had to take action. I had to make sure they didn't get away with it. Though I had a plan, I needed evidence, hard evidence of the way that Kyle and his mother had treated me. I decided to hire a private investigator to help me. Mr. Sean was the kind of guy, discreet and practical, that I needed in this delicate situation. I said to Mr. Sean over the phone, "I need your help. My spouse, Kyle, and his mother haven't exactly been friendly to me. I need evidence of what they did." "What kind of evidence are we looking for?" Mr. Sean asked in a composed manner. "Everything that exhibits a pattern," I replied. "Emotional, financial, or even legal abuse. Anything that can prove what they've been doing." "Intelligent," he said. "I'll start with some background research and monitoring. I will look into everything, including their pasts and possessions. You will get what you need." I felt like I was finally taking control when Mr. Sean was on my side. I started recording every interaction I had with Kyle and his mother, including our phone calls and talks. I needed all the evidence I could get. With me, nothing would be left to chance. During all of this chaos, my closest friend Maria became my primary source of comfort and support. She had been there for me the entire time. On a particularly bad day, I told Maria, I don't know how I would get through this without you. She comforted me, saying, you don't have to go through this alone. I'm here for you always. So what's the plan? Maria inquired. I'm gathering proof, I told her, outlining my strategy. Mr. Sean is also contributing. I wish to reveal the true nature of Kyle and his mother. Maria gave me a worried glance. Be careful, Rachel, she cautioned. They're not going to see this coming, and when they do, they'll be furious. I know, I nodded, but I can't let them get away with this. Over the next few weeks, the evidence I collected started to build up. It was clear from the phone calls that Kyle's tone was often aggressive and demeaning. The financial records Mr. Sean uncovered revealed just how much control Kyle's mother had over his assets. Some of the transactions we found were questionable, hinting at possible fraud. The more we uncovered, the more disturbing the picture became. One evening, Maria and I sat down together to review all the findings. As we combed through the documents, something jumped out at us. Look at this, Maria said, pointing to a series of bank statements. They're moving large sums of money, but where is it all going? And these emails, Maria added, scanning through them. It sounds like they're planning something, but we don't know what yet. We need to connect the dots, I said, feeling the weight of everything we were uncovering. This isn't just about emotional abuse anymore. There's a whole web of lies and manipulation going on. Maria's eyes widened as she stared at the evidence in front of us. Rachel, we're on to something big here, she said, her voice filled with both excitement and fear. The more I delved into the evidence, the clearer it became that Kyle and his mother were involved in more than just toxic behavior. This went beyond their mistreatment of me. They were hiding something much bigger, something possibly illegal. I could feel the truth slowly unraveling, and I was determined to see this through to the end. As the days passed, I became more focused on my goal. I wasn't just collecting evidence for myself anymore. I was uncovering a story of deceit and manipulation that needed to be exposed. Kyle and his mother had spent years weaving this web of lies, but now I had the power to tear it all apart. There was still much to be done, but I was no longer the helpless bride they had tried to humiliate. I was stronger than they had ever realized, and soon the truth would come to light. This wasn't just about getting justice for myself. It was about making sure they faced the consequences of their actions. I wasn't sure how things would end, but one thing was clear. I was ready to fight, and I wasn't going to back down. The whispers of that day were nothing compared to the roar of truth that was about to come crashing down on them. I would no longer be a victim of their games. I would be the one in control. I started to piece it all together. Looking over the documents again, I realized something shocking. I think they're embezzling funds from Kyle's company, I said to Maria, my voice barely above a whisper. These documents, they're incriminating. Maria looked at me, her face serious. Rachel, this is really serious. You need to be careful. They won't take kindly to being exposed. I know, I said, feeling a mix of fear and determination. But I can't back down, not now. There's too much at stake. The evidence wasn't just about how cruel they had been to me. It was more than that. It pointed to serious criminal activity. I had everything I needed to make a move, and it was time to come up with a plan to bring them to justice. It was also time to take back control of my life. Maria, I said, feeling the weight of my decision. I'm going to expose them publicly. Maria hesitated for a moment, knowing the risk involved. Rachel, that's risky. You're playing with fire. But if anyone can do it, it's you. With Maria by my side and the evidence in my hands, I felt stronger than I had in a long time. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. This was about justice, about making sure Kyle and his mother faced the consequences of what they had done. It was time to show the world who they truly were. The next step was clear. I had to bring everything out into the open. I decided to organize an event, pretending it was for a big announcement. I invited friends, family, and even a few media contacts, people who would help get the story out. The venue was lavish, with an atmosphere full of excitement and curiosity. Everyone was eager to hear the news. As I stood at the front of the room, I took a deep breath. The time had come. Thank you all for coming. I began, keeping my voice steady and my expression calm. Kyle and his mother, Mrs. Paul, stood beside me, smiling. They had no idea what was about to happen. Rachel, darling, we're so proud of you, Kyle said, his voice sweet but insincere. Whatever the announcement is, we support you. His words felt like poison, but I stayed composed. I've gathered you all here to share some important truths, I said, pausing to gauge the room's reaction. Truths about my marriage and about the Paul family. Mrs. Paul's smile faltered. Truths, she repeated, her voice shaky with a mix of confusion and fear. Rachel, what are you talking about? I'm talking about the abuse, the lies, and the illegal activities that have been going on behind the scenes, I said, my voice growing stronger with each word. The room went silent. The tension was thick, and all eyes were on me. Rachel, have you lost your mind? Kyle's face turned red, his anger barely under control. Quite the opposite, Kyle, I said calmly. I've never been more sane, and I've never been more sure of what I need to do. I gestured to the screen behind me. Exhibit A. I announced as a video started playing. It was a recording of one of our many heated, abusive conversations. The crowd gasped as they heard Kyle's voice, full of anger and cruelty. The murmurs grew louder, and I saw Mrs. Paul's face go pale. Her hands started to tremble. This is just the beginning, I said, holding up a folder filled with documents. These papers show financial irregularities, embezzlement, fraud. It's all here. You can't do this, Rachel, Kyle shouted, his voice a mix of pleading and threat. You're ruining everything. I looked him straight in the eye. I'm not ruining anything, Kyle. I'm exposing the truth. A truth that everyone deserves to see. The media personnel who had been invited started clicking their cameras, capturing every moment of this dramatic revelation. There was no turning back now. This was it. Rachel, please. Mrs. Paul's voice was barely a whisper. Her confidence shattered. Let's talk about this privately. There's no need for this public display. I shook my head. No, Mrs. Paul. No more private discussions. The time for hiding is over. The responses in the room changed as I showed more proof. While several visitors shook their heads in shock, others expressed shock. Though there were murmurs and whispers among the throng, nobody could dispute what they were witnessing. Mrs. Paul and Kyle stood motionless, their facades of decency melting away to reveal what was really going on. This is my story, I began, turning to face the group. It's a tale about overcoming cruelty and speaking up against injustice. I refuse to be a victim any longer. The occasion concluded with a rush of activity. As I was being surrounded by reporters, numerous guests came up to me with encouraging and uplifting remarks. I had done it. I had shown the truth. And I had done it while remaining composed and strong. It was a triumphant moment for me as I at last got back my voice and my authority. It wasn't the end, though. The following stage, when everything would be resolved finally, was the courtroom. Feeling a mixture of nervousness and determination, I sat in that austere, intimidating room. Beside me, prepared to battle for justice, was my lawyer. I was prepared to see my journey through to its absolute end because this was its last act. Across the courtroom, I couldn't help but observe how uncomfortable Kyle and Mrs. Paul appeared to be. As the trial got underway, their once confident expressions were suddenly displaying apprehension. My attorney stated, "Your Honor, we are here to present the case against Kyle and Mrs. Paul in a firm and confident tone. This isn't just about a divorce. It's about years of emotional and financial abuse that Rachel has endured." From across the room, whispering to me, Kyle leaned in to say, "Rachel, you can't win this. You're crossing a line." With a forceful yet calm voice, I addressed his gaze. "Kyle, this isn't about winning. It has to do with fairness. It's about being authentic to everyone." The trial proceeded, and my attorney skillfully presented the evidence. The evidence of the horrible existence I had led was abundant and included financial records showing their manipulation, recordings of Kyle's harsh remarks, and other supporting evidence. Every bit of evidence was indisputable. My attorney went on, "Your Honor, as you can see, the evidence is overwhelming. We are not only seeking a divorce, but also legal actions for the wrongs that have been committed against my client." Mrs. Paul looked scared and tried to shield herself. "Your Honor, it's all just a misunderstanding." Rachel's voice was weak, even to her own ears, as she exaggerated. I looked straight at her and maintained a steady, direct glance. "Going too far. The evidence speaks for itself. You can't hide from the truth any longer." The court listened intently, reviewing all of the testimony and corroborating evidence. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, she rendered her decision. "In light of the overwhelming evidence, I grant the divorce and order legal actions against both Kyle and Mrs. Paul for their conduct." The gavel struck, and I felt vindicated and at ease. It was completed. I had confronted them, stood up for justice, and prevailed. I had at last closed a long and painful chapter in my life. I came to the realization that it was time to move past my legal disputes and start the process of recovering and starting over. I found myself in the country, in a little, peaceful house away from the chaos and drama of my former existence. The peace and beauty of the location were just what I needed. I sat on the porch of my new house, sipping a nice cup of tea and enjoying the peaceful surroundings. The trees were gently swaying in the breeze, the sun was beaming softly, and distant birds were chirping. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I felt a wave of peace. This was a fresh start, a life free from abuse, dishonesty, and misery. My voyage had been difficult, but it had been good. Not only had I survived, but I had triumphed. Now that I had rediscovered my inner power and voice, I felt free. As the sun began to set and cast a pleasing glow across the horizon, I smiled to myself. I was in the ideal location at the ideal moment. I could make a happy, hopeful, healing future for myself, even if it was uncertain. This was my inspiring tale, the tale of a woman who refused to give up. I'd overcome all the obstacles and was now enjoying a life of freedom and peace of mind. I understood that even if my journey had come to an end, I still had a brighter, better life ahead of me. The journey of Rachel has come to an end. Do you think she was right to expose her husband's mother and pursue legal action against him? Perhaps if she had handled it differently. Share your thoughts in the space below the comments. If you enjoyed the tale and would like to see more like it, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel. With your help, we can tell more engaging tales.